Welcome to Bled Talk, the podcast where insightful conversations meet language learning. I'm your host, Samuel Bledsoe, and on this show, we dive deep into a variety of topics with fascinating guests from all walks of life. Whether you're an English learner looking to sharpen your language skills, or simply someone who enjoys thought-provoking discussions, Bled Talk is something for you. From engaging interviews to solo episodes filled with knowledge and inspiration, join us as we explore the world one conversation at a time. Get ready for a journey of learning, curiosity, and meaningful dialogues. Welcome to Bled Talk. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Bled Talk. We have a great guest today. Some people even say that we kind of look alike. You can tell us in the comments, but apart from looking alike, we're actually from very different places. And his name is Dan. He's from Brit Speak, and before we get too far into it, I want to hear your story, Dan. I want you to tell us about, where did it all start and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. I'm proper privileged to be here today, loving it. So, yeah, my story. Well, I'll try and fast forward as quickly as I can. I was born in Sheffield, in England. It's not famous. Fast forward 32 years, I moved to Japan, and then fast forward another 8 years, and it's today. So yeah, basically that's my story. But to give you a bit more detail, I studied sound recording at university, and then worked in IT for a bit. And I didn't want to sit in front of a computer every day. I wanted to meet people, so I became an English teacher. And now I sit in front of a computer all day, teaching English. So life is weird sometimes, But yeah, that's my story until today.
No, that's great. So what made you decide to move from England to Japan? What made?
So it depends if you want the real answer or the answer I always tell people. So the answer I always tell people, the reason I came to Japan is a pretty obvious one. It's obviously to become Pokemon Master is the reason I came here. Of course, that's why I got on a plane. But the truth is, I was working in IT, I didn't want to do it anymore, went back to school, became an English teacher, and applied for a bunch of jobs, and Japan just happened to be the one that got back to me first. So, let's go to Japan. Packed all my stuff up, got on a plane on my own, with like a handful of Japanese expressions, didn't know where I was going. And yeah, I'm still here. So obviously something went right.
No, that's a good answer. I like it. And how was that transition for you? Was it pretty easy to kind of go from English culture to Japanese culture, or was there anything that was a little difficult for you?
I don't think it could have been much harder without actively trying to make it difficult. Like, I learned a bit of Japanese before I got here. I could ask like, where's the station and how much is this and stuff. Yeah. But then, you might have experienced a similar thing. When I got here, I wasn't living in Tokyo, and I was living in like Osaka, and they've got a very different dialect. And everything I knew was basically pointless. Nobody spoke that way. Nobody said those things. And even if I could say the things, I couldn't really understand the answers, So basically I was at zero. I was in a country that the level of English was pretty low where I was living. There wasn't many foreigners around. Like, I couldn't communicate in their language. They couldn't communicate in my language. I'm in a completely different culture on my own. I don't know anybody here. Those first 3 months were challenging, to say the least. Like, no, I remember that first night, I'm just saying, like, what have I done? Like, why am I halfway across the world from everyone I know? What am I actually doing? And then when you kind of get used to things and, you start picking up more of the language and finding your feet, so to speak, like, it gets better. But culturally, language-wise, I don't think I could have got much further away from where I started, to be honest. So, yeah, it was good.
I understand that. Yeah. When I came to Brazil for the first time, they had what was called a missionary training center. And so it was just this little building where when you get to the country, they put you there and you spend 6 weeks and they teach you some of the language, but mainly it's like they teach you how to act, how to be a proper missionary. And then they send you out. And where they sent me was this place at the end of the train line, so like literally I was at the edge of the world of that place, and it was just lots of forest and lots of different places. And the city itself, or I guess the little town, really, nobody spoke English. Nobody could really understand me. The person who I was working with didn't understand me. He didn't speak any English. And I almost tell people that as hard as it is, because it is one of the most difficult times, and like you said, there's a lot of moments where you just sit there, kind of scratch your head, and you're like, I don't know why I'm here. Don't know why I decided to do this. This was not one of my smartest decisions. And then, after some time, you end up speaking somewhat pretty well, and I almost would say that you start speaking better because you were in a place that you kind of had to do that flight or fight, like you have to decide, or I'm going to speak and I'm going to be able to express myself, or I'm just going to go home. And, I always tell people that my pride didn't let me go home. So I decided to try and learn, and I wanted to do it. So I completely understand that. But like I said, I think it almost helps a lot better. And would you say that now you're pretty good after, you said 8 years, right, now that you're in Japan?
Yeah, like 8 years coming up. So I'm same as you. I'm stubborn. I'm like, I don't want to go. I'll just suffer through it, and sink or swim, fight or flight, whatever you want to call it. Like that definitely kicks in, doesn't it? It's like, well, I've got to survive, so I better. There's not a better motivator in this planet than survival. Like, I got to survive here. So you pick it up pretty quick when you have to. But yeah, like 8 years. For the first few years, I studied pretty hardcore, but on my own, like bought some textbooks and, just talk to everyone. What I used to do, I used to pick up a new expression from a textbook or something. And then I'd want to say it to everyone. But Japanese people are quite shy and they don't really want to talk to random people on the street. So I worked out pretty quickly that if I went to a standing bar, like a bar where people go after work, after 2 beers, that's the limit. Okay, now they're free to talk. So I just kind of hang around and just talk to anybody that would listen and try this expression. I'd say it like 20, 30 times a night and just kind of take note of what people were saying back, and slowly but surely kind of built up a little, I don't know, like a phrase book in my head that I could kind of use with people. And that's kind of how I learned Japanese, just kind of talking to random people in bars, which meant accidentally I learned this very specific dialect that, when I came to Japan, I thought, oh, it's Japan, it's all Japanese. It didn't occur to me there'd be different dialects and different accents. And so then, like, the first time I went to Tokyo, people were really confused. Like, why are you speaking this, like, weird dialect? Like, well, I didn't know that wasn't normal. Right. So, yeah, kind of had to then go back a little bit and be like, okay, let's see how generally people speak rather than this specific area. And then I did some, like, test prep stuff, and because everybody tells you, oh, you're supposed to go and study for exams and stuff, and I didn't know any better at that point, so I went and did some tests and whatnot. But I would say I'm functionally fluent. I'm not anything special, but I can get by in pretty much every daily life situation. And I mean, if it's something a bit more in depth, like going to the doctors or something, maybe I'll struggle a little bit, but I can deal with most stuff. So that's good enough for me, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think, like you said, surviving really does motivate you to do a lot of things. And do you think that learning Japanese and kind of going through that process, did that help you in your English teaching? Did that kind of change how you wanted to teach English once you learned?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, one thing it really clued me into is like the fact that there's different kinds of learners that learn in different ways. Like without getting too technical, like I'm definitely like a kinesthetic learner. Like I learn by doing. Like, and most Japanese education for foreigners is very much like, verbal. Here's a textbook, write out the expressions, kind of constantly like a maths equation and you're putting the pieces in. Well, my brain doesn't work that way. Like, that's not me. So understanding like how I learn really helped me understand how other people learn. Like working out what doesn't work for me helped me work out like when somebody's struggling, like, oh, it's because they're this kind of learner. And also, I don't know who decided this at some point, but textbooks and resources for learners are so boring. Like, I don't understand why they decided it had to be this like really dry, unrealistic view of the world just because I'm learning. I'm not an idiot. I'm just learning. Like, can we not have some fun?
Right.
So I always try to make it as realistic and as entertaining as possible. It doesn't have to be boring just because you're learning. Like, I don't know why that got lost somewhere in the ether, to be honest.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'd say
no,
that's something that helped me a lot.
that's interesting that you bring that up because I tell people a lot of times when they ask me about my classes, um, they'll ask about like materials and things like that. And I always tell them, I know a lot of different places that have different materials, and I like certain lessons that people have made and that people have written, but I don't really like the textbooks themselves because, like you said, they're dry and it feels like somebody made the textbook and like bribed the world to accept it. They're like, hey, I worked really hard on this and I will make sure all of you live very happily if this book works. Because it doesn't make sense. Like you said, I remember in high school, when I was back in the United States, I was learning French. That was the language I was going after. And our teacher was from France, and the books were about like Canadian French and from like 1985. And our teacher was like, these books don't really teach you anything useful. Like my first 2 years of French were both teachers that were like, yeah, these books don't really teach you French. And I had a lot of people in class who they were always like, the teacher's not following the book, the teacher's not doing the, and I was like, do you want to learn French? Do you want to follow the book? Because obviously there's a choice. And if they're doing it this way, it's because they know that something is there, something is possible. And when we were talking about like kind of figuring out how we learn and knowing that other people learn other ways, that's one thing that I really like about teaching English is that I do a lot of private classes or small group classes, and so by doing that, I get to cater how the student learns to them, because I have some students that they enjoy reading something and then discussing what they read and having that type of conversation, whereas I have other students who they prefer to know the rules before they try to talk, and so I give them the rules, but then there's other ones that just want to talk, and there's all kinds of different ways, and I think that that's really the best way to learn is that the best way is that there's not one special way to learn.
Yeah, everyone's different. In the UK, we've got an expression where we say horses for courses. It basically means like everybody's good in their own situation, right? So there's no point trying to get somebody who learns by doing by making them memorize rules because they're not going to do it. So like, why force them? And why say, oh no, if you want to learn English, you've got to get this textbook and you've got to go through it. And like, nah, mate, that doesn't work for me. Like, let's work out another way. And like, same with you, I do private lessons and, I've catered the lessons individually to each student because everybody's different. They've got their own situation, their own goals. Like, why you wouldn't try and teach everybody the same in any situation. So why do we try and do that in English? It don't make sense to me at all. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and it's interesting because I was going through a course for teaching English as a second language, right? I think that's one of the certificates, and then the people they would talk about how to teach students and things, and I don't know. I guess I was a little different in the fact that I had started teaching before I started doing the course, because since I came to Brazil and I learned Portuguese, a lot of people would ask for English tips, and I just kind of used that and move forward. Obviously, I tried to look for the best explanations and things. So I kind of had to do my own personal study of English, because I always tell people, just because you're a native doesn't mean you know how to explain everything in English.
I
Um,
didn't know anything about English before I became a teacher. Like, I had to buy a book about English grammar for teachers because I didn't know what this stuff was called. Like,
right,
of course, I'm a native speaker and I know what's right and what's wrong, but I didn't know why it was right or what it's
right.
called. Or so
Uh-huh.
same, exactly
Yeah, that's
the
what
same.
that's what I tell people. I was like, just because we're a native doesn't mean that we know why. So we can tell you if you're saying the right thing, but we can't tell you why you're saying the right thing. And as a teacher, that's kind of what I had to do. I would get people who would ask questions, and you had to do that whole, well, let me get back to you. And then after that, you're freaking out because you're like, I got to find this answer, because if not, and so, by kind of doing that and doing this course, I hear all of these methods and things that they're like, yeah, this really works with students. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Like, at least in my experience, these things that I'm not saying that it's wrong, but they give you a lot of things and they're like, this is how we do teaching. And it's almost like I see why so many people have so many problems with English, because I'm like, I don't think that they talk to the English learners and ask them really what's the problem? Why aren't they learning so fast? Because I don't know if they have this problem in Japan, but here in Brazil, they have this problem that they go to English school, they go there often, and they try to learn. And after 5 years, they know some things, but not enough. And they kind of get unmotivated, and they don't really want to move forward.
You just
And
kind of want to throw in the towel at that point. Like, I've been doing it
yeah,
for 5 years and it's not working for me, right? So,
exactly. And so that's
yeah.
why
Same.
they look for us. That's why they look for the individual teachers.
I mean, there comes a point where, you know, the definition of insanity is like banging your head against the wall over and over again, expecting a different result, right? Like, so I think a lot of people, when they're learning English, at first it's great. You kind of just translating all the words into English, and like the kind of trajectory of learning is really quick at the beginning, and everyone feels great. But then you get to that intermediate plateau where your progress just seems to stop, even though you're studying the same amount you did before, and that's the point where people either give up or change, right? And so often just changing the way that you're interacting with English changes everything. Like, if you're going to a class for 5 years and you notice that you're not actually making progress anymore, maybe you've outgrown that class. Maybe it's time to try something different, and just kind of mixing it up a bit. Like, you wouldn't want to eat the same meal every day for 5 years. So why would you try and do the same thing in English every day for 5 years? Do something different, man. Try it. What's the worst that could happen? If it doesn't work, try something else. Great.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. I think in the UK they say it too, but at least in the States we always talk about how you don't learn inside your comfort zone. When you're comfortable, you're not going to get anywhere. So you kind of, I always tell people, you don't have to leave your comfort zone 100%, but at least keep one foot in and put one foot out. Try and grow it. And as soon as you are comfortable with what you're doing, that means you need to change. You need to keep going. And it's the same way with us when we're trying to learn Japanese or Portuguese. You need to keep going a little bit farther if you want it to grow. And so I always tell people, I talk about politics in Portuguese, and people are like, they correct me, they give me all these words, and that's what I want, because, I can talk about, oh yeah, I teach English, I do that, I can talk about normal things, but I want to be able to talk about new
The
things. I
deeper
want to be
stuff.
be able to express even more. And so, by stepping outside of that comfort zone, going and doing things that I'm not really comfortable with, really does help me grow a lot more, I think.
It's like, it's like a paradox for learning a language. You're like, people are scared of making mistakes, right? So they they don't try anything new, because if they just stick to what they know, they're not going to make a mistake. So they avoid making a mistake. But in order to get better, you've got to make mistakes and learn from it, right? So it's counterproductive. The whole point of getting better is that you learn from things that you did wrong so you don't do it wrong again, right? So when I kind of thought about that, the game changes. Instead of trying to reduce my mistakes to zero, I'm going to try and make more mistakes. I'm going to try and make 1,000 mistakes, because that way I've got 1,000 chances to get better. And trying to flip it on its head. Like, nobody cares if you make a mistake, right? You know, if you're speaking in Portuguese and you say something that's not what they would say, or is kind of slightly wrong, or whatever it is, nobody's going to be mad. Nobody's going to think any less of you. They're just going to be like, oh, he's trying. I'll tell him the correct way. Great. Like, you didn't lose anything and you gained new information. That's great. So, like, I always tell my students, it's like, stop trying to be perfect and just try. And then you'll be surprised how much better you actually get.
Yeah. Here in Brazil, one thing that really affects that, and that I tell people constantly, I tell my students, I tell anybody who's talking about English, is that most native speakers outside of Brazil, if you go to the US, if you go to the UK, if you go to South Africa, Australia, wherever, and they speak English, they are not going to make fun of you when you try. If anything, they're going to try to listen to you and understand you. And I always tell people, you're going to have one or two things. Either they're going to listen to your mistakes and just kind of go over them, not as long as they understood what you said, they're not going to correct it. And then there are people that might correct you, but they're going to correct you because they want you to know the right way to say it. But they're not going to make fun of you. If they do laugh, it's because you said something maybe that's really funny, and they're not laughing at you, they're laughing at the thing that you said. And sometimes we say funny things. And here in Brazil, there's a culture within the English learners that if somebody says something that might be wrong, they laugh at you, and they laugh at you trying to say it, and they laugh at your pronunciation, and they kind of create these. Because I don't know if you've noticed with your wife, but Brazilians are very outgoing people. They're very excited. They love to talk and to party and all those things. But when it comes to English, it's 100% different. They become very reserved, and they're like, I don't want to talk because I don't want this person to hear how I say things. And I think that because of that, they're scared to talk to us, talk to the native speakers, because it is intimidating, talking to somebody who, once again, will hear all of your mistakes and might correct you. But the thing is at least for us, in our cultures, we don't correct people, or we don't laugh at people because they're speaking wrong. And I think that's a fear that a lot of people have, is that they're like, oh, they're going to laugh at me. And it's like, not really. I don't think so. Maybe
not unless there's something there a bit weird, and they're just that kind of person.
Yeah, they might be a jerk, but other than that, that not all of them are. Most of us are decent
Pretty
people.
Cool.
So it's good. But yeah, and kind of moving on from that. So we were talking earlier, and we both discovered we have Brazilian wives.
Yes.
How was that for you, kind of adapting? Not only did you adapt to UK culture, but you had to adapt to your wife's culture as well. Do you think that, and obviously if she's listening, I don't want to get you in trouble, but do you think there's any difficulties that you've had kind of adapting to those things in the past? Obviously now everything's Gucci.
Yeah. Now everything's cool. Yeah. Everything's Gucci. Love it. Of course, obviously I'm a fish out of water anyway, being an English guy in Japan. And then my wife's, from Brazil, but I met her in Japan, and kind of got this triangle of cultures going on. And there's definitely some stuff that takes a while to kind of get your head around. Speaking more from my wife's perspective, she really struggles with the fact that British people are really indirect. We don't say what we mean. you kind of had to read in between the lines with British people a lot. I'll give you an example. Maybe she says to me, okay, do you want to go to the park this weekend? And I'm like, yeah, we could, which sounds like a positive response. But actually in British English, that means, no, I don't want to. And kind of getting used to, I have to be way more direct when I'm speaking to, because I know, it's a second language, or it's actually a third language, or whatever it is. And the nuance is too much. So I have to force myself to be quite direct, which is quite difficult for me as a British person, I mean, the stereotypes. We wouldn't say boo to a ghost or whatever it is. And yeah, like, it's one of those things that it's all about give and take. Like, I have to do things that are weird for me in order to make that relationship better. And I'm sure she has to do things that she feels is weird and not how she's used to doing things to kind of accommodate. Like, so there's definitely the best example I can give you. When we first started dating was that in the UK, we don't like to be too close to people. We like a bit of space, So if you're in a conversation with somebody and they're too close, it's normal to kind of just back up a little bit. Just give them a little bit of breathing room, right? Turns out Brazil does not work this way. It turns out if there's too much space, that's a bad thing. So we found that we'd start a conversation in one room, and eventually, like, through me backing away and her moving a little bit closer, we'd end up in a different room 10 minutes later. It was like, what are we doing? So that was a fun one, when getting used to that at first. So.
Yeah, no, that's very accurate. I agree with actually both of those, because I always tell people, so like here in Brazil, people always joke and they say, hey, you know what, you guys should give a class on how to understand American humor, because here, and if an American tells a joke, nobody laughs at it. And I think it's funny when I see it happen, because I see American people who are trying to be funny, and I understand what they say, and so I think it's funny. But then I see everybody else, somebody says a joke and they go, yeah, and you're like, that was supposed to be a joke. Yeah, it went right over. And the thing is, but I realized what it is. It's because I think Americans, and I think British people might even be a little bit more, is sarcasm. We're very sarcastic. And here, sarcasm is not as funny as it is for us. And
Sure.
So here, even sometimes, like with, I was talking to my wife, I might be really sarcastic with her or with somebody else. And instead of them laughing, they end up calling me ignorant, because they're
What
like,
are you doing?
yeah, why are you saying that? And I was like, it's just a joke. I'm just trying to be funny. But yeah, I understand that. It's one of those things that I think, depending on who you're talking to, you kind of, and I think that goes for everywhere, you kind of have to understand what's the level. But yeah, when it comes to, I think, like, especially American culture, I can speak from that, as we're very sarcastic to each other, and we think it's okay. We laugh at it, whereas here, not so much. And the hugging thing too. I am not like a hugger or somebody who's
I mean, if I, yeah.
if I meet you and I know you, sure, I'll give you a hug, but like, I won't continue hugging you for.
It's like 2 seconds max is what we're talking. Like,
it's like a bro hug. You give a little hand, half a hug, and that's it.
And then see ya.
But here, it's like you see someone, and all of a sudden, it's like their hand finds their way to your shoulder and doesn't leave the shoulder until you're done with the conversation. And so it's like,
yeah, I'm not touchy-feely like that. Like, it's hard for me. Like, even with my, best friends and family, I still don't want to be touched that much,
Yeah. I
don't know, man.
Yeah, when I see people like family, I hug them maybe I don't even think I hug them when I see them. I think I hug them when I leave.
Yeah.
That's about it. But, and that's interesting that we kind of bring that up, because I know in Japan, people are very touchy-feely either. Like you said, they're very, kind of reserved to their selves. And then another different question, I think, with like culture, how's the food in Japan? How's the change of food from UK to Japan?
Well, it's kind of cool because, like, I don't know if you know this, but there's a bit of a stereotype about British food that it's, in fact, terrible. And I used to defend English food, but like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's pretty good. And then I left England and I tried Japanese food. I'm like, oh, now I get it. Like English food is trash. I understand now. So,
You guys
like,
actually
oh,
had a bread sandwich, or is that just a joke?
yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing.
Oh my
It's a thing.
goodness.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
had everything sandwiched, to be fair. Like, if you can put it between two pieces of bread, probably we'd eat it. So, and there's like all those memes are like British food best in the world, and it's like beans on toast or something. But, I can laugh about it, English food. But I took my wife to England, and this is 2018, first time that she went to England. And after like 2 days, she was like, why are you guys scared of flavor? Like, what's wrong with you? I haven't got a defense. I'm like, yeah, fair enough. All right. What's the joke is like England conquered half of the world looking for spices and then refuses to use them. It's kind of a joke. But, I digress. Japanese food is awesome, generally. High quality, low cost, really good. Some of it I'm not a fan of. Some of it's a bit weird, but generally it's pretty good. But of course, I'm married to a Brazilian, so I eat my fair share of Brazilian food as well.
Have you had feijoada yet, or no?
Yeah, like the I'm not that big on beans, which is a bit weird.
I
But
wasn't.
it's
I
all
wasn't
right.
either, but it like depends on how they make it. Because here in
Yeah,
Brazil, the typical plate is beans, rice, some type of lettuce, and then
and then
you
some
have
extra.
protein.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I lost a lot of weight the first time I came to Brazil because I
yeah,
did not love beans and rice. So,
yeah.
um,
Oh,
but
the
after a
rice
while,
thing in Japan, you have to get used to it pretty quick. Like, otherwise you're gonna struggle.
yeah, that's kind of what I've learned. I'm like, I guess outside of the States, and do you guys eat a lot of rice in the UK? I don't think so, right? Or
Not really. Like we love potatoes and
yeah,
whatever
first
else,
two, I
but
think.
potatoes and bread. Like
I
that's
I
basically
always
British
tell
food.
people that our beans and rice is potatoes and bread. There's always some type of potato, some type of bread
Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah. Same.
your yeah. And how's last time I talked to Jordan? We talked a little bit about pizza. I was curious to know what's your opinion on Japanese pizza?
So, I mean, obviously we've got Domino's and Pizza and all that stuff, and it's different to England, but it's still there. But I don't know. At some point in Japan's trade history, they signed an agreement to buy corn, right? And obviously, somewhere on this agreement, there's an extra zero, and they've ended up with this massive surplus of coin. And they were like, what are we going to do with all this corn? And they're like, let's put it on every single pizza. I don't think I've ever seen a pizza in Japan that doesn't have corn hidden in it somewhere. And I'm like, Japan, what's with the corn on the pizza? Like, can we not just have one pizza that doesn't have corn on it? Like, I'm not a big fan of corn and I quite like pizza. So can we not just try one without corn? Like, don't be silly, Dan. Come on. Use your bread loaf. You got to put it wherever we can get it. So, I mean, it's all right. It's small. That's the problem. It's like yay big. And I'm a big lad. I need a big pizza to deal with that. So, but my wife always tells me like, no, this is terrible. Brazilian
Hey,
pizza's way better. Brazilian
well, I was
pizza's
gonna
way
say,
better.
has your wife taken you to Brazil yet to try the
Not
pizza?
yeah. I mean, we were supposed to go in 2020, but things
Yeah,
took a
right.
turn for the worse around then.
Yeah.
So it's on the agenda. Eventually, I'll get there. But
It's
I'm more
me.
excited about is eating like like the coxinha and the pastel and all that kind of good
Oh, yeah.
stuff. Like I'm looking forward to that.
Oh yeah, the pizza. See, the good thing is your wife is from São Paulo, and so São Paulo has the best pizzas in Brazil. It's like the hub of good unhealthy food, I would say, and so it's the right place to be. Now, a lot of people do ask me here, like if I prefer American pizza or Brazilian pizza, and I always tell people it just depends on what you like. Like here, they put tuna on pizza. I'm not a huge fan of fish on pizza. And same as you, they also like to put corn. Like, I'll be eating pizza and there's a little piece of corn on there, and I'm like, and
Come on,
not
guys.
a
Come
good
on.
surprise. But I do agree, but Brazilian pizza is very, very good. I was lucky on that trade. It was
Yeah.
very delicious. And is there any food that you had in Japan that you know were you had that moment where you're like, how have I been living without this my whole life? And like now you eat it
Yeah, I know.
frequently.
There's quite a lot of stuff that, although it's possible to eat in English, it's just not the same. Like the first time I came here and had like proper Japanese ramen, like game changer. Like can't go back. Like you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. Like it's game over. I'm never gonna eat the old ramen I had back home again. So a lot of stuff really that it's just better. I can't really come up with any better analogy than it's just better. Like even when I go home to England now, I'm always a bit like, "Ah, I can't wait to get back to Japan and eat some good food. You know."
Yeah. No, that's good. I think that's interesting because I always tell my wife that here it's funny while I live here, I'm like, man, I really miss some of those American delicacies. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I go back to the States and I'm like, oh, I need to go back to Brazil and have some of those Brazilian things because they're
Same.
both good and they're different. And because a lot of people also, they think that American food doesn't have flavor, but at the same time, like I always tell people, I'm like, look, in the US, we're the people who deep fry everything, who, if it's unhealthy, if it's gonna kill you, we probably made it. And
Yeah.
so, it's I sometimes I miss those things, but I think knowing how to make food as well, that's something that I kind of got while I moved to Brazil, is that I couldn't find a lot of foods that I wanted to eat, so I learned how to make them. And it's been nice. Obviously I did not get skinny the second time because I figured out how to make all the things that I like to eat.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. And so kind of moving on from food. So for you, like, what would you tell somebody who's listening, for example, and they're trying to learn English or they're in the process, or any other language for that matter? What would you give as some good advice for somebody? Something.
Yeah. I got I got some thoughts. First of all, language is not the goal. You're not learning the language for the sake of learning the language. Like you're learning the language because it's a tool to accomplish something else in your life, right? So don't spend all your time designing the tool and not knowing how to use it. So if you're going to learn a language, you've got to use that language from day one. And then going back to what I said earlier, nobody cares if you make a mistake. Most people, even if they do notice, they don't care. So, get over yourself. Get over this fear that you've got and just start doing it. Because what's the point in not doing that? I can't understand why you would spend years learning and then not just want to use it all the time. So, first of all, kind of shift that mindset. The second thing, which works for me, is like, I'm not the kind of person that can sit down and study for 3 hours or 4 hours or 8 hours on a weekend. I'm not that guy. For me, it's all about short blasts, but regular. 10 minutes learning vocabulary and, listening to a podcast while I'm driving, or, some way of interacting with the language regularly for short doses. And you'll be surprised at how much difference 10 minutes a day can make as opposed to 8 hours on a weekend, So try to build your day and then fit English study in where you can as part of that. Like, don't set aside an hour. Be like, okay, I've got 10 minutes on the train. How can I use that? And build it into your schedule. The other thing, make it fun. It's not supposed to be boring. So, find, instead of reading a book in English, find something you enjoy and read a book about that just happens to be in English. Listen to a podcast in English, great. Listen to a podcast about something you love in English, better, because you're more likely to actually enjoy doing it. So, yeah, basically try and build English into your life as much as you can. And one last mindset tip is this. If you spend your time worrying about what the listener thinks of your English. Remember this. You're speaking in English because they can't speak your language. So you're doing the work for them. You're not doing it for fun. You're doing it to communicate with them, and you're doing that extra legwork. You're going that extra mile. So what they think about it doesn't matter because you're the one putting in the effort, not them. So stop worrying about what they think and stop focusing on, oh, I got this tense wrong or I mispronounced that word. Focus on, well, I just had a conversation for 10 minutes and the guy understood what I was saying. That's pretty awesome. Pat on the back. Good job. So if I can boil it down to just a couple of words, stop worrying and start doing. And that's the best thing you can do.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Those are great tips and great things. And Dan, this has been a wonderful conversation. And, if we could, I'm sure we could talk about a lot of other things, a lot of other topics. And you're a great person with a great personality and just full of good experiences. So thank you so much for all of this. And everybody who's listening, like I said, Dan has he has all the social medias. He's pretty big on Instagram, so that's a good place also to find him. And he has a couple websites too, right? To be able to find things.
First of all, Instagram, you search on there, BritSpeak, you'll find me. Also, I've got my own podcast, the BritSpeak Pod, which, we're going to kind of do the away leg on my podcast at some point. I'll get you on as a guest. That'll be lovely. And I've got a website as well where I basically deal with British English and British English slang and the English that we actually use in daily life. Yeah. And if you're interested in that, I've got a free downloadable guide. It's like a little dictionary of British slang, A to Z of British slang. You can get it right now. It's britspeak.co/Bled Talk, right? So if you can put the link in the show notes, that'd be wicked. Download it, learn some British slang, impress your mates, and sound like a natural if you end up down the pub. Sounds good.
Awesome. That is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dan, once again. Thank you, everybody else, for listening. And like you said, this isn't the last time you'll see us together. So there will be more in the future. And thank you, everybody, once again. Everybody have a good day, good night, whenever you're listening. And we'll see you next time on Bled Talk. Thank you for listening to Bled Talk. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more content. We are on all of the popular podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and we're even on YouTube. Don't forget to send in your questions and your suggestions. Thank you once again, and have a great day.